morning. Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? Do need to say a very quick good morning to All Terrain Manx over on Instagram, but also to Feltham Demolition. Haven't seen Feltham Demolition in the chat before, which is good news. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Also going to say good morning. I think our first early riser this morning was Jim Turner. Morning, Jim. Our mate Mick is here as well. Morning, Mick. Mark Whiting is in the house, so everyone is present and correct. Alex Latham says, morning, all great day yesterday, delivering some Pasma Towers training to staff at Warwick Castle. Hence why I didn't get a chance to watch yesterday. I didn't get a note from your mum, but I'll take that anyway. That's well worth doing. But Warwick Castle, we have people working in castles now, and not just below stairs. Yeah. This is the caliber of people that we attract. And speaking of that, if you were here yesterday, you will recall that I promised to feed yesterday's after show chat, The Crack, through an AI and turn it into a podcast. I did. I know some of you heard it, and it really was remarkable. So I'm going to be doing it again today, assuming that The Crack is similarly illuminating today. But there's an important point, a distinction I would like to make. The AI that I used to do it was, let's make no bones about it, very, very impressive. And its ability to pick out the key items from about 30 minutes of chat really is remarkable. But the most impressive thing is not the AI. It's actually the quality of the discussion. I was thinking about this morning. I honestly can't think of a place or a platform where conversation of that quality and insight is taking place in the demolition or construction industry anywhere in the world right now. So people, I tip my brand new hat. I tip my hat to you all. So keep up the good work, people, because I enjoy listening to the podcast summary of the chat almost as much as I enjoy the chat itself. So keep it coming, would you? Now, I'm going to get into the show in just a second, but about next week, things are going to be a bit erratic next week, I'm afraid. Or to put it another way, there will be no show on Wednesday or on Tuesday or Wednesday, actually. As you may know, I'm due up at JCB on Tuesday afternoon and all day Wednesday. Well, we've also got an opportunity to do something else while we're in that part of the world, and that's going to require me to leave here shortly after Sparrowfart on Tuesday morning. So just be absolutely clear. Absolutely clear. No show on Tuesday, no show on Wednesday, but we will be here on Monday and we'll be back on Thursday to regale you with tales of our pilgrimage to JCB and much more besides. Mick says, hold on to that hat. Dan will be on your back. I'm a little surprised he's not been on what we used to refer to this as on the ear roll when I was a kid, on the scrounge. I've got about, something like 20 new hats sat behind me. Brand spanking new, straight back from Las Vegas, and he hasn't actually tipped me the wink yet. I'm sure he will, and we are going to be giving away some of that. The other thing I do need to do is to give away some of the goodies that we picked up while we were there. Got a big bag of merch to give away. Just need to find a good excuse to do that, so I'll be doing that. And all things being equal, I mean, JCB are usually very, very generous with these things. I'm hoping to come back from JCB with a goodie bag as well. We'll be giving that away as well, so watch this space. Now, without further ado, I'm going to roll the intro, post the question of the day, and get this poor excuse of a show on the road. Thanks for that comment, Jim. It always sounds like I'm trying to put you off, and I promise you I'm not. I'll make no bones about it. We're going up early on Tuesday to see Digbits. I'm going to go and do a bit of filming with Marcus Clay over at Digbits. So that's the plan for Tuesday. We're going to finish up there, go to JCB, finish up at JCB, and by that time, hopefully, we'll have been through the footage. If there's anything that we need to fill in gaps with, we're going back to Digbits again. So Jim, I'm going to come up to your part of the world, and just for no good reason in the future, at some point I'm going to come up to your part of the world, and me, you, Chris Ford, sit down in a pub or a cafe and just chew the fat for several hours. I promise I'm going to do that. You have my word. Now, it is a Friday. It's Friday. Can you believe it? It's Friday, the 11th of October. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the walrus of demolition. In today's show, Division 2 contractors over in Canada uses Premier League attachments. We're making the grade below ground. How Caterpillar is reducing mine hauler emissions. And we have some superb Dutch demolition for you as well. Plus, in today's episode of Mark's Morning Monologue, we're going to be discussing bullying in the demolition and construction workplace, which apparently affects 1 in 5 workers in the sector. Nothing to be proud of, is it? But before we get to all of that, we do have the small matter of today's mystery machine to get to. And I've got the wrong thing there. That's a little weird. Bear with me a second. I'm just going to have to upload this. Bear with me a second. I don't know what's gone wrong there. Yeah, while that's uploading, let me play you this. It's okay, problem resolved. It was there anyway, I just couldn't see it. So, mystery machine for today looks a bit like that. Interesting colour. Is it a clue or is it I'm going to say a red herring. It's quite clearly not red in any way, but you get the idea. Steve Williamson has just joined us. Good morning, Steve. Thank you very much indeed for being here. I'm going to come back to the question of the day in just a moment, but the mystery machine is here, and I've not spotted Dan Cullen in the chat thus far. So bearing in mind he is currently in the lead, we could do with somebody else getting this to keep the pressure on Mr. Cullen. So if you've got any notion on what that might be, then please let us know. While you're trying to figure that out, I'm going to take that away because it's also time to remind you of the question of the day. Yeah, the smallest question of the day comes once again from our resident quizmaster, Mr. Gary Muirhead. And I have to say, just to put it on the record, I miss Gary. In the nicest possible way, I hope he gets another job that puts him back on 10 o'clock break times. He's not quite the same round here without him. But his question for the day is this. What book or movie left a lasting impression on you? Now, personally, I've got loads. The Breathing Method by Stephen King, story I still play over in my head probably 35 years after I first read it. The movie Jaws reinforced my fear of sharks as swimming in the sea. What is that? 40 years on? This is still a no-no for me. I enjoyed The Book Thief so much that I bought copies for friends and families. And the TV adaptation, I know there's a new movie out about this, the TV adaptation of Stephen King's Salem Lot scared me shitless. But what about you? What book or movie left a lasting impression on you? I'd love to get that in the chat. I'm going to go back to the mystery machine very, very quickly. That's what we're working with. And there's a smidge more. Got any clues on what that might be? I'd love to hear from you. Now, Mick says, I'm going to take that away because I want to give it the full attention. Been coming through the new workers' bill. Grief almighty, WTF. What the hell? Sort of. Have we really become a bunch of pansies? I'm going to, before I get to that, I'm going to just very quickly say, Stephen Steele over on YouTube says, Donnie Darko broke my mind. Yeah, I can understand that. That's a weird old movie, and no mistake. Here's the thing, and I know where you're coming from on this, Mick, and I'm kind of in agreement. I kind of know where you're coming from. But I think there's, I don't know if there's actually a word for this, but if you think back, let's go back 40 years, 50 years in demolition, when people were dying with some degree of regularity on demolition sites up and down the country. Well, we've gradually whittled that down. And as we've whittled it down, rather than worrying about deaths because there's less of them, we started to become more concerned with major injuries. Well, we've whittled those down as well. So as a result, we can now make quite a big song and dance about slips and trips or bits of muck in somebody's eye or cuts and grazes, which by comparison to a site death, not a big deal, not a great thing. If you cut yourself on site, possible infection and everything else, you don't want it. But by comparison to a death, the issue we've got is precisely the same with this new workers' bill. You go back even further, 100 plus years, we were sending men down to pit, we were sending kids up chimneys and so on. Well, we've gradually whittled that down. So we have less and less and less to worry about. And we're now at the point of having to worry about, well, one of the subjects that I'm talking about in today's show, at the end of today's show, is going to be bullying. And there's a fine line. There's a fine line in demolition and construction between banter, which we've all experienced at one time or another, and bullying. And I don't think that line, not only is that line fine, I think it depends upon the recipient of that banter, quite how it's taken. And one of the elements that comes up in the discussion, which I'll get to at the end of the show, is that those basically non-UK residents, so migrant labour, tend to be the victims of bullying more often. Now, you might point at that and say that's because the industry is racist. It's as simple as that. The industry is racist. Or is good old British banter not landing in the same way with somebody, a non-English speaker or a non-native British person than it would, Mick, I'm sure you're the same. There is a word in the English language. It's the one that my mum always forbade me from saying. Begins with a C, ends with a T, and it's got a UN in the middle. Now, in some parts of the world, in some parts of the country, that is possibly the worst insult you can level at people. Where I come from, almost a term of endearment. And I think I'll get back to the point with Mick in just a moment. I think one of the issues you've got there is if I said that to one of my mates, hello, you old, they take it one way. If I said it to somebody else, they take it in quite another. But going back to Mick's point, I know what you're saying, and I know there is this belief that Keir Starmer is something of the woke messiah and everything else. But I think we've whittled down the we've whittled down the major issues facing the workplace to the point where the actual issues have got less. And, people aren't so concerned about dying at work anymore. They're more concerned with being insulted, if you get my drift. Anyway, there's a difference between being hard on workers, especially new starts, to make them better at their job. Bullying is when you start being personal and calling them names. See, there is a thing there. And listen, I'll be first to admit that I've laughed at a few of these. Those old, sending the apprentice to the builders merchants for the long wait and stuff. My son, I've mentioned this before, my son, when he first started working part-time at McDonald's, was sent to the back room to fetch a box of steam. Again, depends who you're doing it to, will reflect on the outcome. Now, my son, once he was in on the joke, laughed it off. Oh, yeah, okay, I've been caught out. Another person might take that really, really personally. And I think maybe the easy answer is to do away with that kind of thing. And I realise all-encompassing regulations are a problem. I always go back to football. I was never a football hooligan. I don't get drunk at football. But some people were, and some people did. The only sensible solution to that was to basically outlaw booze at football matches. But that then impacts on everybody, which is not necessarily the way you want to go. There you are. Going back to our question of the day, life is beautiful. Don't know that one. Need to go and check that out. See you next Judy is something a lot of folk find very offensive. Personally, I think it's a lovely word. Yeah, it's Richard E. Grant's favourite word, apparently. And if it's good enough for Richard E. Grant, it's good enough for me. Yeah, but as I say, my part of the world, South London, term of endearment, not a problem at all. Right, okay, we'll come back to all of that. We'll get onto the bullying thing in just a moment. But first, this. I don't know the story behind this, but I just want to make a very quick point. If you were starting a new demolition company and somebody said to you, well, your company will need a name. The temptation, obviously, is to name it after yourself or whatever it might be. Why would you name your company Division 2? Would you not call it Division 1 or Premier League? Just me. Anyway, there's a Canadian company called Division 2. They may be called Division 2, but they are using some Premier League attachments, as you're about to see.
I'm Nick Steele, Superintendent for Division 2 Contracting. We're at the Granville Street Bridge Demolition Project. So we chose to run the RDP-40 processors on this project, just given the size of the concrete and girders we had to process through. We needed something that was capable and could handle something that large, and I've used them for similar size concrete in the past and had success with them. We are running 2 RDP-40s on this project. I do like the cutting blades. They've been chomping through this rebar pretty well as we've been processing this bridge deck. I found that these work really well when compared to other similar size pulverizers. The size of the jaw opening was key, because given the size of these bridge girders, it was very key that we had something that would open that wide to be able to encompass them. Going forward, we will continue to work with Shear Force for implements, breakers, processors, and shears on future demolition projects for sure.
Nick Steele works in demolition. I don't know if he's still around, but we used to have a local butcher. I used to drive a van, and he was known as Mr. Lamb. And his name was actually Mr. Lamb, and he was a butcher. Yeah, really and truly. Now, I'm just going to say a very quick good morning to Vicente Ramirez, all the way from Texas, the Lone Star State in America. He says, hi, huge fan in the US. This is the first time I've been able to catch you live. Well, you are welcome, sir. Thank you very much indeed for being here. And please, when you've got time on your hands, please send my love to all of Texas. It might take you a while, but please do that. And Mick has apparently switched machines because he's now on a different one, under a different name. I'm not going to ask the question. Let's have a look. We need to do a bit of this.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
We're all familiar with graders, aren't we? Well, we all know what a grader looks like. Whenever I think about graders, I think about them on haul roads and stuff like that. I don't generally think of them being underground, but apparently that's a thing.
Welcome to the future of underground mining, where innovation and sustainability collide. I'm Dan Stern, Senior Product Manager with McLean. Today we're underground at McLean's Research and Training Facility in Sudbury, Ontario to introduce the McLean GR5 EV Grader, our all-new electric motor grader that's set to transform the mining world. As shown in our previous video series, the GR5 is an extreme duty design vehicle, purpose-built for underground mining. The GR5 features unique designs such as gear-driven tandem axles in lieu of chain drives, a robust hydrostatic drive system for a machine that lives on a 20% grade, a purpose-built enclosed cab with excellent visibility of the working area, and an extreme duty drawbar, circle, and mold board designed specifically for the rugged and abusive underground world. With a powerful 134 kilowatt hour NMC battery, the GR5 EV grader is designed for the toughest underground conditions. It combines advanced technologies with silent operation. Equipped with rapid chargers and off-board CCS capabilities, charging is quicker and more flexible, minimizing charge time and keeping your operations running smoothly. Elevate your mining operations with a revolutionary electric motor grader. If you have any questions, we invite you to visit us online or contact your local McLean representative. And as always, have a safe day.
underground grader, all electric. I do love the fact that he said it was silent. And then it was moving, whatever that was. Was that coal? I'm not entirely sure. Made quite a racket, I thought. But yeah, good work to McLean and their underground grader. Now, I've been remiss somewhat this morning. Let me show you a bit more of this. This is our mystery machine. Now, our usual star of the mystery machine, Mr. Cullen, is absent, so there is an opportunity for somebody to play a bit of catch-up. That's what you're looking at. Have we decided what type of machine it is yet? As always, I'm looking for a make and a model, if you would be so kind. This is not your run-of-the-mill machine. I'm telling you that for nothing. I wouldn't be at all surprised if I were to emerge with the 3 points today. But if you've got any clues on what that could potentially be, I would love to hear from you. I'm going to be back in just a moment. We've just been having a look at underground mining and low emission or zero emissions. We'll be doing more of the same in just a moment with the mighty Caterpillar. Well, I just need to show you this. BM 1113 Heavy Equipment Videos, who I don't know, but good morning to you over on YouTube. The Finnish grader manufacturer Vikmas have underground graders too. Well, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to go and check them out. Vikmas, I've never even heard of them. And I mean, bearing in mind, I've spent a fair bit of time in Finland over the years, with Sandvik and with Rama and people like that. I don't know Vikmas. I will be looking them up. But BM 1113 Heavy Equipment Videos, thank you for being here and thank you for the update. I really appreciate it. Thanks very much indeed for tuning in. I'm going to check out your channel a bit later on as well. So thank you for being here. Yes. Low emission mining. Just as a very quick aside, based on our visit to Mine Expo a couple of weeks back, and our exposure to Fortescue mining and the T264 from Liebherr, I am working on a podcast at the moment about how Fortescue is trying to redraw the landscape for mining on sort of a low emission, basically looking at mining through a low emissions or a zero emissions lens. I'm working on that at the moment. It's going to be quite a long one, I think. So watch this space. Go back to this, as our friend again says, no problem. Yep, thank you very much indeed. Oh, well, 100 quid of laptop, 5 weeks old, and now won't charge. So someone's going to get an earful when I get to the shop. Just bearing in mind, we're going to be talking about bullying later on. So what's your P's and Q's, would you, Mick? So yes, I talked about emissions related to mining, and we're going to be doing precisely that now with Caterpillar.
Our mining industry is facing an unprecedented challenge today. We've collectively committed to these long-term goals of greenhouse gas reduction.
That could be a combination of using alternative fuels, that could be using biofuels, all the way to a truly battery electric machine. It's that customer's pathway to get to their own reduced emission solution.
No two sites are the same. Depending on the life of the mine, the mix of the fleet, the age of their fleet, diesel cost in their region, do they have access to renewable energy? Are there impacts to their use of diesel fuel or the carbon tax? All could be factors that play into the end solution and how much they need to reduce now as well as in the future.
It all starts with planning, and that means working together to understand what are our site goals. Working with CAT Job Site Solutions, working with our dealer network to do site assessments, to do payload and productivity studies, to understand maintenance practices. Through those mechanisms of getting to know the site better, we can really deliver optimal solutions. Can we rebuild to extend the life of the fleet? Whether that's just rebuilding the powertrain or rebuilding the entire machine, you can couple that with CAT Reman, which reduces the amount of waste that goes into landfills and allows us to recycle the equipment, lower the total cost of ownership, and improve our greenhouse gas and emissions output. Miners have to make environmental reductions as well as achieve productivity and cost goals. So that really helps extend the life of our existing assets.
Autonomous haulage in Caterpillar's MineStar portfolio helps a client or customer transition to an emission-reduced mine site in a variety of ways. Having great utilization and really truly optimizing the fleet helps reduce non-productive time and really helps the client focus on moving tons safer and not having extra fuel burn. From an assignment engine perspective, making sure that the trucks are going exactly where they need to go, making sure all of the operation knows exactly what charging is needed and when, will ultimately help all of those machines work together in one single ecosystem. By utilizing that technology, it really helps the customer look at their own plan for what it's going to take to get them to a truly electric fleet in the future.
The focus shifted from the machine, and can we develop a battery electric machine, to how do I get my site ready to accept this new technology? How do I get my people ready? How do I manage the change that comes with putting a battery electric machine at my site? We launched what's called our early learner program to accelerate our understanding of what is the impact of the energy transition on a customer site. How does it impact their people, their process, their technology, and their infrastructure? One of the biggest takeaways so far is that the real problem to solve is an energy management problem. It's looking at the whole site and understanding, is there enough renewable energy coming to site? Once it's to site, how is it distributed? How are you managing the energy on not only the mobile equipment, but also your energy transfer solutions? With a battery electric fleet, transferring energy onto the machine is a critical element in the uptime of the machine. You can either transfer it statically, so the machine pulls up to a charging station, or it can transfer it dynamically, where the machine is transferring energy while it's moving and doing work. Our new CAT Dynamic Energy Transfer System provides a highly flexible solution. So it's able to move and grow as the mine plan changes. You're able to uninstall it and reinstall it within a matter of days, not months. And you can utilize it on today's diesel electric equipment. This could serve as a great bridging strategy towards the future, helping our customers achieve their interim objectives. It could also set up a great building block for the future if they intend to go to a fully battery electric fleet. We're extremely excited about the positive impact that our new CAT Dynamic Energy Transfer System can have on our customers' operations, their climate-related objectives, and the overall impact of the productivity at the site.
I think one of the things we can do in this moment in history is work more closely together. We really believe that planning together, working together, understanding those goals can deliver the best solutions that not only make an environmental impact, but also deliver better cost, better productivity, and safety along the way.
I just want to pick up on something that Mick said here. Being on power stations, oil depots, when you look at the size of some of these mine sites, I realise now I've been doing demolition on Lego. I remember years ago, I don't even know why I was watching it, but it was like a National Geographic or something like that, and they were talking about the scale of farming in places like Iowa over in the States. And I mean, my main exposure to farming has been through Clarkson's farm, which is, it's a UK-wise, it's a pretty big farm, but it's, fairly small by comparison. And I remember when it's time to harvest, whatever it is they're harvesting, there was a bunch of guys all driving combine harvesters, and they do so side by side. So 10, 20, 30 combine harvesters all driving side by side. And they basically do it as kind of an extended trip, because according to this documentary that I watched, they will basically drive in a straight line like that for about 6 days. And then they'll turn around and they'll come back the other way. The farms are so huge. Listen, I realise a combine harvester isn't the fastest piece of equipment on the world, but imagine driving in a straight line for 6 full days. And, you do your working day, you camp out, and you turn around and you come back after 6 days. Absolutely astonishing. Yeah, looking like I'm that dinosaur. If only we had all this years ago. Yeah, indeed. I do. Watching that energy transfer thing, there was two things that reminded me of. The first one was Scale Electric. Do you remember that? The little brushes under your car. But it also reminded me, do you remember the old bumper cars at the fun fair with the overhead thing that used to spark and stuff? Looks a lot like that, only off to the side rather than above. Probably just me. I think we've got one more film to show you, which I will do in just a moment, immediately after this.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
We started today's show with some Canadian demolition, and we're going to play out with some Dutch demolition. Wasn't expecting to cut off quite as quickly as that, but yeah, very nice from kind of Hazen over in Holland. Thank you very much indeed for supplying that. Ken Hatcher has just arrived. Good morning, Ken. Sorry, missed the show. Been to the cafe for breakfast. No need for an apology. In actual fact, quite fancy going to the cafe myself. Ken, just very, very quickly, this is the tail end of the show, but I said at the top of the show, there will be no show on Tuesday and Wednesday next week. I'm off to Digbits and JCB next week, so there will be no show Tuesday or Wednesday. So feel free to go to the cafe on both Tuesday and Wednesday, because you won't be missing anything at all. I'm going to roll the end of show stinger in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into my morning monologue, which is all about bullying. So if you can't stick around for that, then please stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. Hope to see you all again very soon. Have a great weekend, everybody. But if you do have the time and the inclination, I've just realised this remains unresolved. What do I do? Do you know what? I'm going to carry this over. I'm not going to claim the 3 points because I don't need them. I'm going to carry that over. I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'm going to carry that over to Monday next week. So I'm going to take that away and leave it precisely where it is. We'll pick that up again next week. And Mick has just put a dagger in between my ribs. He says, I'm off to Manzi's after this. For those of you that don't know, Manzi's is, you may argue, but you're wrong. It is the greatest pie and mash shop in the world. The one in Towerbridge Road is a personal favourite, but hey, there are several. Our friend says that our mystery machine is a Chinese loader. It's not, actually. I think the colour suggests that it might be, but it's not. So if you'd like to find out what it is, please be here on Monday next week. Mick, if you're leaving now, please enjoy your pie and mash, but please stick around because I'd like your input on what we're about to discuss, which is bullying in the workplace. Be right back after this. Whether we were the victims or the perpetrators, it would be nice to think that bullying began and ended in the school playground when we were all too young to know any better. However, recent studies show that a staggering 21% of construction employees have experienced bullying in the past year alone. That's 1 in 5 workers facing abuse or worse from their colleagues or their superiors. The sources paint a vivid picture of how this bullying manifests. It can range from outright abusive and intimidating behaviour to more subtle forms like overbearing supervision, snide remarks about someone's work, or complete and deliberate exclusion. One piece of research that I read while I was putting this together said that bullying was generally a mix of isolation, humiliation, and intimidation. To put that in demolition and construction language, that basically means singling out one or more persons, constantly and consistently taking the piss, or actually threatening them. What's truly alarming is that nearly 30% of those that actually experienced and reported bullying were told it was just banter. Presumably that's the same banter that makes female demolition and construction workers dread going to work each morning. This banter defence is a dangerous way to downplay and dismiss harmful actions, especially considering that half of these bullied reported suffering. Let me do that again. This banter defence is a dangerous way to downplay and dismiss harmful actions, especially considering that half of those bullied reported suffering from anxiety or stress as a direct result. We have to remember that the construction industry is already grappling with a mental health crisis. Over half of the UK's construction workers report mental health issues, and tragically, as we all know, we lose 2 people to suicide every single working day. The long hours, physically demanding work, and financial pressures inherent within the industry undoubtedly contribute to this crisis, but bullying exacerbates it. The fact that younger workers and non-UK citizens are disproportionately targeted by bullying raises serious questions about discrimination within the industry. Almost a third of non-UK passport holders reported being bullied, compared to 18% of UK citizens. Furthermore, while the report doesn't focus upon sexual harassment, it is viewed as a form of bullying under the Equality Act of 2010. Furthermore, discrimination based upon gender is also highlighted as a recognised issue within the sector. These stats clearly suggest the need for a cultural shift, one that embraces diversity and inclusivity and actively combats any form of discrimination. Employers have a crucial role to play in tackling this problem. They have a legal and ethical obligation to create a safe and respectful work environment for every employee. Implementing clear anti-bullying and harassment policies is a vital first step, but it can't stop there. These policies need to be actively communicated to the entire workforce, and regular training should be provided to ensure everyone understands the boundaries of acceptable behaviour. Furthermore, employers must establish confidential channels for reporting bullying and to ensure that every complaint is thoroughly investigated. Creating a positive workplace culture requires more than just rules and regulations. It demands a genuine commitment from leadership to prioritise respect, inclusivity, and mental well-being. Openly addressing inappropriate behaviour, supporting those who speak up about bullying, and actively celebrating positive, respectful conduct can create a ripple effect throughout the industry. Ultimately, tackling bullying and abuse in construction requires a collective effort. It's about changing and challenging outdated attitudes, fostering a culture of respect, and creating a work environment where everyone feels safe, valued, and supported. So, my question to the wider audience, have you ever been bullied at work? Have you seen bullying taking place at work? The comments very quiet today. The one thing I would say about this, and I did go off slightly at a tangent because it was a question that I went and sought the answers for. There's no mention in any of that about specific gender bullying, but we've reported on this show before about female demolition and construction workers turning up to find dildos stuck to the windscreen of their excavator, or in the cab of their machines, or stuck in the women's toilets and that kind of thing. Now, again, as I said at the top of the show, I think there is a distinction to be drawn. There are some women that would probably laugh that off. There are others that would take it personally. Should they have to laugh it off? That's the question. The other point as well was I thought the 2 parts of the workforce that were most likely to suffer from bullying apparently are the younger, so the usual the banter that goes with The Apprentice, or apparently with non-UK passport holders. Now, how does that pan out? Is that he's foreign, I will give him a hard time, or is it he's foreign and he actually doesn't get what's going on? And bearing in mind, and I don't want to come across as a big old snowflake here, but bearing in mind the way that the British handle speaking to somebody foreign, our attempt at communicating with somebody whose first language is not necessarily English is to stick with English, but to say it much, much louder. And it's not just those that don't speak English. I've seen that happening with English people speaking to Americans and to Canadians. You know, they didn't quite get the gist, or they didn't quite understand the accent the first time. So the answer apparently is to shout at them. As I say, I don't want to come across as a big old snowflake, and I realise trying to make your point heard is not the same as bullying. But I think bullying and banter, it's like they say about beauty. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think bullying and banter is in the eye of the recipient. You might make a light-hearted joke or comment about somebody. The way that you've meant it means one thing. The way they received it could mean quite another. I'm going to go over to the chat. What we got here. When I was an apprentice bricklayer, I got bullied for a bit, but a guy called Jock sorted him out. He was built like a brick house. Never happened again. Yeah, I've mentioned this before. A friend of mine from when I was growing up, always, he was one of these people that tinkered with stuff all the livelong day. You know, he loved nothing more than fixing washing machines and stuff like that. And he was always destined to work with his hands. And he basically became a motor mechanic. But he went to a local car mechanics place. Garage is the word I was looking for. And, you know, as part of the banter, he was told that he would be working down in the pit with, I don't know, Dave. I can't remember the guy's actual name, but, you know, let's say his name was Dave. And he was warned that Dave was an aggressive, predatory homosexual. Well, Dave was obviously in on the joke. He wasn't an aggressive, predatory homosexual at all. He was just an average bloke, but this was part of the wind-up culture for The Apprentice. So my mate John was down in the pit with this guy alone, and Dave started to unbutton his overalls. My mate John threw a spanner at him. Turns out it was all just a joke. It was all good-natured, but it's a big old spanner. He could have caused serious injury. Steve says, a lot of your foreign workers now do more work than our UK workers. They have more to prove and do more and do a better job. Do you know, it's a very interesting point, that. And I don't want to get bogged down into political stuff, but I do remember in the run-up to the Brexit vote, whatever that was it 2017, 2018, something like that? I do remember speaking to a lot of demolition company principals. I've been spending a lot of time on demolition sites in London and in Birmingham, because I wasn't doing the live show then. I was out and about a lot more. So I was spending a lot of time on sites and, you know, encountering lots of Polish workers, Romanian workers, Bulgarian workers, and so on, Hungarian, lots and lots of people from primarily Eastern Europe. And they were properly hardworking. And remarkably, a lot of the guys that were running the sites and running the companies were saying how reliant upon that migrant labour they were. And yet, when it came time to actually put a tick in the box, they voted for Brexit. And they've been kicking themselves, not on the, you know, I don't think anybody's going to ever actually say, I voted for Brexit and I was wrong. But I do think having voted for Brexit and having seen some really, really hard-working, committed people going back home again because they were made to feel unwelcome, yeah, not the most sensible move we've ever made. Jim Turner says, sorry, missed most of the show as raking tarmac. Although bullying is very real and obviously wrong, a bit of blackguarding can be misunderstood as bullying, and a deserved dressing down can be misunderstood too. As for harmless crack, it's a matter of judging the person and the situation. Yeah. And I wonder about that last point, because, I mean, you've been raking tarmac, and you'll know what I mean when I say it. That is an intense bit of work, okay? Because tarmac has a nasty habit of going like concrete. You get it down while it's hot, you rake it about, you put it where it needs to be, and so on down the line. So there is an intensive bit of work that accompanies that. Much the same as when, the concrete arrives. The concrete is poured, you need to get it into the places where it needs to be, and so on down the line. A truck arrives and you're loading that truck. You need to get that truck loaded. So there are periods within construction where you're working but not working particularly hard, but there are periods of intense activity. And that idea of, we need to get this done. The way that you do that, we need to get this done, all hands to the pump, can be taken as, okay, all hands to the pump, or bullying. Again, I'm walking a fine line here because I consider myself pretty old school, and I've had bosses shout and swear and throw things at me in the past. Kind of made me the guy I am today, for good or for ill. But I think in this modern day and age, is there room for that? Mick says bullying has been part and parcel in the construction demolition since the year dot. It's wrong in any form. So saying that there are some things meant in jest depends on how one takes it. Yeah, exactly. It's the lens through which it is received. I work for someone who was known for it. But when you stand up to them, they back down. In the end, if anyone feels bullied or used, walk off. Done it a few times myself when I was younger, and a right-hander works wonders. See, there's the issue. And I mean, we've been talking about bullying. By and large, we're not talking about actual physical abuse. We're talking about more verbal and mental abuse and that kind of thing. That can result in. And I listen, Mick, you're old school, and I've been on demolition sites. I've been at demolition do's. I've been in offices not related to demolition at all, where I've seen, what do they call it now? Hands being thrown. General fisticuffs, people punched on the schnoot because they stepped out of line. And I understand all of that, but it's not really the solution, is it? Particularly in this modern day and age. And I again, let me please reinforce that I am not I'm not being Mr. Woke here. But when you think about how, let's take comedy. Comedy as an example. I grew up watching Benny Hill. And I used to laugh at Benny Hill, and I used to think Benny Hill was really funny. And I liked the fact that he had very attractive women in their underwear on his show. Loved it. When you're 12 or 13, a woman in stockings and suspenders kind of makes you weak. Not a problem at all. With the benefit of hindsight, I can now see that maybe for primetime TV, perhaps not particularly appropriate. Much the same as Bernard Manning. Don't get me wrong. I thought Bernard Manning was very, very funny when I was a kid. Used to watch the comedians and then go to school the following day and tell the mother-in-law jokes to my friends. Mike Reed, much the same thing. I understand all of that. But I think with the benefit of hindsight, we can look back and go, well, maybe. I think we've got exactly the same thing in the way that we treat our workers. I said it earlier. There was a time when we would send children up chimneys. We would send men down to pit, with very little in the way of protection, with very little in the way of security and safety. We now know not to do that. I think the time has come to realise that this is not the way that we treat our workers. And I wonder about the way in which demolition and construction hierarchies work. There is a tendency, I think, to take on people and you give them a role. They're good at the role, so you bump them up a bit, and they're good at that, so you bump them, and they gradually move up the career path. I think being good at a job is one thing. Being a good leader of people is possibly another. And I wonder. I wonder if that's appropriate. Two late arrivals. Mick Dalton is here. Good morning, Mick. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Chris Ford says, morning. Hope you're all having a better Friday than me. Why do drivers always fetch a track off in the most shitty, awkward places? Because that's sod's law, my friend. That's the way it works. Mick says, verbal or physical, it doesn't matter. When you get intimidated in any form, sooner or later, something will take over you. If you let one bully let one bully you, then you're open to the pack. Yes, you are. But I also think that cuts both ways as well. I think if there is a site, let's say, for example, there's a site and there's a non UK passport holder being abused by somebody. Let's just say it's the site supervisor having a particular issue with the passing Pole who happens to be, a UK passport holder. I think they are setting an example. So if you then get another Polish person, it's almost not expected, but it's kind of acceptable. We abuse one Pole, we may as well abuse all of them. And it's setting a precedent, isn't it? Dan Cullen says, late to the party. Happy Friday, guys. Thanks, Dan. I'll tell you now, the mystery machine went unresolved today, Dan. So you didn't lose any points. Nobody caught you up. I'm going to hold it over until next week. That's a promise. Chris Ford says, I'm 60. A woman in stocking suspenders might get my heart racing. Just wish I could remember why. I still chase women, but I'm out of breath by the time I catch them. And then I can't remember what I was supposed to do. The old jokes are the best. Mick says, I find that millennials don't have the same acceptance of on-site banter and crack as I did in my youth in the 1960s. They seem incapable of earthy humour. That was part and parcel of the job back in the day. Mick, you will have missed this. We were talking about this at the very top of the show, about the new workers' right bill. Mick, the other Mick, raised this, and he was saying we've become a bunch of pansies. And I think part of it is down to the fact that we have less to worry about now. And just to recap that very, very quickly, go back 50 years and people in demolition construction were dying with a horrifying degree of regularity. We get awfully uptight about the fact that 40, 45, 50 people have been killed on demolition construction sites in the UK, and we're right to do so. But if you went back 50 years, that 50 was more like 200. 300, whatever it might be. And I think we've whittled that down to the point where we have to worry slightly less about fatalities and slightly less about major accidents and major injuries. And we're now focused on things like, getting a bit of crap in your eye or cutting your hand on a bit of rebar or whatever it might be. And I think we've got exactly the same with this. And I also wonder, just to, Mick, your ex-military, I'm doing inverted commas. I can never remember exactly what your relationship with the military is. But the military, I think, they've got a certain way of doing things. And I think abuse is probably the wrong word, but, the sergeant major shouting in your face, part and parcel of military training. So I think if you'd had that, if you'd encountered that for a prolonged period during your military training, if you then went on to a demolition or construction site, frankly, the abuse that you might receive there would probably be pretty tame by comparison. Whereas now, we've got an entire generation that have never done military service, have never done national service and that kind of thing. And they've been raised in a different way. And I know it's, and I'm going to get to Dan in just a moment. In fact, I'll put his comment up here. There you are. The industry is too full of snowflakes and afraid to get into the job at hand. What created the snowflake? What created the snowflake? Has there been a shift in the genetic makeup of young people? Did we go through the millennium and something mystical, magical happened in the ether to make people a little bit softer and a little bit easier to offend, a little bit quicker to complain at offence? Or has society moved to the point where we can now, we can see that what we used to consider banter is possibly inappropriate in some instances, but also we've created a work environment where people are actually willing to say, hang on a minute, that used to be okay, but it isn't anymore. You think about the nicknames that think about the nicknames we used to have for people. Paddy. Every Irishman was Paddy. It feels a bit inappropriate now, doesn't it? And, we all know the others that we've had for various types of people based on ethnic origin or whatever it might be. I don't, that sits badly with me now. And I think that what we're talking about here, which Dan refers to as snowflakes, I think there is a degree of that you think, yeah, that was fine 20, 30, 40 years ago. Is it fine for today? And everything comes back to football with me. I've been watching quite a few clips of people, old footballers, talking about Brian Clough. Brian Clough was probably the best England manager that England never had. Absolutely fantastic manager. But man alive, he walked a tight line between appropriate and inappropriate. And that, I don't think that would fly in today's, and you can point at the modern footballer and say, oh, they're spoiled and they fall over at yeah, they do all of that, but it's a different era. And I think the rules are different today. So Mick says, too much respect for the Polish. I'm of the age where I know the help they gave us during the war years. Not that I was there, but I know my old man and uncles held them in high regard. There are certain nations in the world, and I'm going to say this, I've never met a Dutchman, a Finn, or a Pole that I didn't like. I've met a few French people that I didn't take particularly well to. I've met a couple of Germans, not a big fan. Met lots of Brits that I'm not particularly keen on. But yeah, the Poles, by and large, yes, not a problem at all. Dan Cullen, like the cap. Oh yeah. There you are. Mick says, told you. Dan's after the cap, not this one. Oh, it's a belter, isn't it? Mick says, agree, Mark. I know the foreman who tried to be like my old drill instructor. Happy to say it never worked. And it's an interesting aside. I'm just going to go off a slight tangent, going away from bullying and stuff like that. When you think about the way that, and I'm going to use them as an example purely because I know them best. Think about how the National Federation of Demolition Contractors conducts its business. It's oak-panelled rooms and it's cigars and glasses of port and all of that kind of thing, and medals around your neck. That all stems from, the NFDC was formed 1941, height of the Blitz, at the behest of Winston Churchill. We all know the legends and everything else. Now, in 1941, in 1951, in 1961, when the war was still very, very fresh in everyone's memory, the idea of cigars in the equivalent of the officer's mess, medals around your neck, I'm sure that seemed highly, highly appropriate, possibly even into the 70s, and, if it had a push, possibly even into the 80s. It's 2024. Nobody does that anymore. Nobody can remember that anymore. So that idea of sitting around puffing on cigars, the unstated, this is basically men's talk, women are not invited and that kind of thing, it's not right for the world anymore. And I think a lot of what we're talking about here is exactly the same thing. Mick Norton says, in hindsight, my 32 years in the military saw me get screwed about by the experts. Yeah, indeed. Jim Turner says, here's a tale. I like a tale. My mate, who's 10 years younger than me, came to us, a green young fella. I didn't know him before that, and apprentice. He spent a lot of time with me. I taught him his trade. I gave him a hard time when he deserved it. At the time, he might have thought it was unjust because he was a daft kid, but he's now a brilliant and conscious ground worker and appreciates the bollocking I gave him then because it made him what he is now. Again, I think it is... I think if it's coming from somebody who is your superior, either by rank or by age, I think that person should have the foresight and the understanding to know where carrot works and where stick works very quickly. West Ham, while Harry Redknapp was the manager, bought a player called Paolo Di Canio. Paolo Di Canio, who was basically, I think to be polite, was a maverick, but he'd also been banned for months because he'd pushed a referee over. Very, very hot-headed Italian in the truest sense of the word. Now, some managers tried their level best to knock him into shape, and Paolo Di Canio, as a result, got worse. got much, much worse. Harry Redknapp put his arm around his shoulders and said, Paolo, go and do your thing. So for about 3 or 4 years, Paolo Di Canio was the greatest player that West Ham had ever seen. And I think having the ability to look at one person saying they need a kick up the arse and look at another one, they need an arm around their shoulder or whatever it might be, that's the difference. And I'll go back to that idea of the way that we elevate and promote people within the industry. Just because you're good as a ground worker and you become a supervisor doesn't necessarily mean that you are a leader of men. Going back to Mick Norton, who obviously has done his time in the military, not every you could have worked alongside the very best sapper, private, whatever it might be. That doesn't necessarily make him the best sergeant major. There are some people that you would work alongside very, very happily. Would you necessarily follow them into battle? And I mean that in military circles. I mean that in industry circles. I mean it in football circles. There are some people that you look up to, but would you necessarily follow them into battle? Jim says, following on from his other bit, but at the time, if he'd cried bully, I'd have got a bollocking. And maybe rightly so. Maybe. I think hindsight is always 20/20, and to be able to look at that guy now and say, look at how he turned out. He could quite easily. I mean, I'd like to think that Jim has got enough about him to know the difference, but he could quite easily have gone, do you know what? I've had it with this. Old beardy here has given me a right old fucking earful. I'm going to go and stack shelves in Sainsbury's. Could have done. Our friend over on YouTube says, wisely, something I've heard, however, is that these days no one mentions asbestos and other things, especially civilians don't know they need to protect themselves during house renovations. It's a huge deal. I don't know where you are based in the world, my friend, but here in the UK, I mean, you basically can't go on a construction or demolition site without asbestos awareness training. And house build or house owners, less so, I would say. And again, I mean, I think we're probably. I think in terms of demolition, we're probably at peak asbestos at the moment. We're still taking down buildings that have got a lot of asbestos in them. But I think if you're doing sort of renovations around your house, chances are we're beyond the peak with that kind of thing. Not entirely sure. But Chris Ford says, I'm getting too old for fighting these days. It hurts for longer, so the skin has got thicker. What's wrong with the crack and banter? The job has gone to the dogs. No offence to the dogs. As I say, I mean, it is the Benny Hill argument again. Would I find Benny Hill funny now? Maybe not. Would I find it vaguely titillating? Yeah, probably. But would I find it as funny now? No. And I think. I think that's just not just because society has changed, but because I've matured. I'd like to think I have a slightly more mature sense of humour these days than little bald men being patted on the head, maybe. Dan says, I'm the same, Mark. I always liked polls and any guys that come here to work. People complain they're taking our jobs. Well, if people got off their asses, this wouldn't happen. It boils down to COVID and benefits Britain. I take my hat off to them. Yeah, absolutely. As I say, I don't want to go sideways. I don't want to go sideways into all things political. But if you are, listen, this has worked both ways. Some of us will remember the TV show Alvida Same Pet, which was basically about a bunch of mostly Geordie brickies. I think there was a Brummie played by a Cockney. That's a whole other story. But it was a bunch of British brickies who went to Germany to make money. Back in the day, Germany was paying over and above regular wages, so there was money to be made. Much the same as we had a lot. One of my mates went to work in Saudi on the oil rigs for a while because he was making big money. If you are willing to leave your home, leave your wife, leave your children to come to a country where you don't speak the native language and go to work in demolition or construction or both, you're pretty bleeding committed, if you ask me. You know, if you're willing to give up family time, you know, we talk about work-life balance and everything else. If you're willing to basically say to your wife, I'll see you in 8 months' time, I'm going to work on a demolition site in London, you are pretty committed, I would say. And the last thing you need when you get here is grief. The next lot of workers are coming from the Philippines. They want the work. Even more so. I mean, I've encountered this. A lot of the workers, when my wife and I go on our cruises around the Mediterranean, the ships are American owned, but most of the staff are Filipino. And when you get to talking to them, you know, they are basically, they work from, I think it's basically sort of March, April time, right the way through till about February the following year. So they do maybe 10, 11 months away from home. Yes, they do get a bit of time off in between, but by and large, they are on the ships and they do the Mediterranean. They do the cold weather ones up into the fjords and that sort of thing, and then they go to the Caribbean, which sounds lovely, but they're all working, you know, below decks and everything else. So that, you know, those people, again, exactly the same thing. They've basically given up home life. They've left their families, husbands, wives, children, and they've gone to work on a cruise ship. Exactly the same thing. Let's not forget, says Mick, bullying comes down the ladder from the top office to the ground level. And I'm glad you said that, because there was a point I wanted to make that I forgot to mention entirely. I've said this about the way in which demolition and construction is managed. You know, we often talk about this with mental health and what have you. The fact that there is a constant pressure on every aspect. You know, we've got 6 months to take down that and build that. So why don't we take 7 months and do it properly? Why, you know, that we all know it's coming down. We have the planning permission. We've got, you know, the finances in place. Why do we not take the time? Instead of which, rather than it's going to be 6 months to take that down and build that. So what we actually do is we allow 4 months to do it. And from the moment anyone arrives on site, be it demolition or any of the other specialist trades in construction, there is a constant from above, crack on. Why aren't you finished? We need to get something else done. The next discipline is going to come in. We've got the steel workers coming in. We've got the piling contractors coming in. Take the time. And then that business of bullying coming down the ladder wouldn't be necessary. Just, you know, you've got, how long do you need? You need 4 weeks to take that house down. Okay. Take 5. Just keep us posted. And then when you're done, we'll bring in the next discipline. It's not hard, is it? Not hard at all. Mick Norton says, when serving in the sappers on the Thai-Laos border in 1967, my Cat D8H needed its donkey engine cranking up by hand, and I made the mistake of laughing at him when the exhaust stack full of monsoon's rain sprayed his face black. I received a sharp right hook to my jaw, which knocked me clean off the track. Never forget that sharp lesson when my work ethic was sadly lacking. And again, Jim mentioned this yesterday. I empathised because I had a son exactly the same. My son Ollie, who is now a manager at one of the David Lloyd clubs, was. I don't know if I can declare this officially, but he was possibly the laziest person on God's green earth. I actually saw him kicking a pair of socks down the stairs because he was too lazy to pick them up and put them in the dirty washing. That's how lazy he was. He has got a work ethic that puts me to shame now. And that wasn't down to being shouted at, hollered at, sworn at, physically or mentally or emotionally abused. Just came with maturity, basically. Jim Turner. And just to put it into perspective, the daft young lad I bollocked on a daily basis is now one of my best mates, and a fella I'd be glad to give a job to. See how you have both matured, eh? Mick says, how about Alf Garnett? So I have a different and slightly unpopular opinion here. I don't remember Alf Garnett Until Death Us Do Part particularly well. I do remember they brought it back. I can't remember what the name of the show was. Doesn't matter. But basically, for those of you too young to remember, Alf Garnett was West Ham supporting, although he really wasn't, West Ham supporting bigot, and that was the joke. What I would say about that is exactly the same as I would say about watching back old episodes of a TV show called Love Thy Neighbour. Love Thy Neighbour was a guy, white guy called played by an actor called Jack Smithurst, who basically had the enormous misfortune, this was the 70s, enormous misfortune of a black family moving in next door. Two things. The black wife was incredibly good looking, and despite the fact that he was a bigot and didn't like black people, he had a bit of a thing for her. But the thing that is missed in both Love Thy Neighbour with Alf Garnett and Love Thy Neighbour, the bigot and the racist was actually the butt of the joke. If you watch back an episode of Love Thy Neighbour, uncomfortable to watch given some of the language that's used and stuff like that. But ultimately, the black guy and the black family always, without fail, came out on top, and the racist white guy was made the butt of the joke. So, would I watch Alf Garnett now? Probably not. Although personally, the reason I don't watch it was that Warren Mitchell, the guy that played him, was actually a Spurs supporter. He played a West Ham supporter, but he was a Spurs supporter. Doesn't sit well with me. That talk about thick skin. The nurse took 10 minutes to find a vein in my arm. She never come across someone with skin so hard. She said I'd been through the wars. Skin like leather. Well, Dan, when you finally turn up your toes, we shall fashion a handbag from your hide. I've seen guys harass Indians, Poles, and other minorities on site. I say the same thing. They're here to support their families in other countries. How would you feel? Thousands of miles away from them, where there is little money and no work. Yeah. Listen, I would say the same about migrant workers. I would say about the people coming across the oceans in little boats. I realise lots of people have got a major problem with that, and each to their own. I'm not going to go down the political route. What I would say, right, if you are willing to do that, you are either terrified of what is behind you. You might be coming from a war-torn place, or you are basically committed to being somewhere else and making a better life for yourself. And I know we have a benefit society here, and I know some will come along and scrounge and they'll use the National Health Service. I know all the arguments, but I wouldn't. It would take a lot. It would take a civil war or a zombie apocalypse for me to load my wife, my children and my grandchildren into a rubber dinghy and hope to make it to France. Something has prompted that. And, I think that needs to be... Mick says, you nearly said it, you didn't. Don't deny it. No, I wouldn't say such a thing. There is a running joke in my family. Both myself and my children have suggested... My wife is quite dark-skinned. And we've told her that she's almost certainly Jewish, and we wind her up about it a lot of the time. She is the family Yid. She's not. We swear blind she's got some in her family, but what about 2.5 Men? Similar. One brother always bullying the other. Yeah, true enough. These jobs are madness. It gets. Hang on a minute. Yes. These jobs are madness. It's get that done as XYZ is coming in 2 weeks. I wonder why they do it, to stress the guys on the ground. Why would you do that? I've never understood that as a notion. How long is it going to take to demolish that house? Take a week and a couple of days for cleanup. So a couple of weeks in. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll do it in 5 days then. What? Listen, what I do is I'm a creative type, if you can believe that. I used to work on a weekly magazine, and I was required to write a couple of articles of about 1,000 words or thereabouts. So I had to research them and then write them and everything else. And to actually sit down, once I had all my research done, to write 1,000 words would take me, back in the day, probably 5 hours, 6 hours, possibly an entire working day. If somebody said to me, okay, well, I hear what you're saying, it's an entire working day, can we have it in an hour? No. No, you can't. I'll only be on the first paragraph after an hour. And yet that's the way that the industry works. Let's have a look. Mick says, look, us of my age brought up in the way he was. I'm a leopard, can't change my spots at my age, given the fact that I'm watching this country go to crap. All this BS about compensation for the slave trade, taking the world, and all it's unwanted. We can't change what we are. Okay, we can paper over it. I'm damned if I would give up all I was taught through my life. I'm not a racist, but I draw the line where people are trying to wipe out my past. Yeah, you can't. You can't rewrite history. You really can't. And listen, do I have personal regrets about the way that the British Empire built itself? Of course. Of course, I think it sits uncomfortably. I'm sure some of you may remember the Harry Enfield character, the apologetic German, who I feel the need to apologise for the actions of my nation. Same thing. I think I would imagine a lot of young people in Germany are now looking back at the First World War and the Second World War and going, kind of wish we hadn't done that. Same with the slave trade. Same with, as Eddie Izzard would say, we conquered India with nothing more than a flag. Do you have a flag? You can't claim India. We live here. Do you have a flag? Does that sit well with me? Of course it doesn't. But you can't rewrite it. It happened. And again, I think. One of the things that gets lost in all of this, I always refer to this as accidents and fatalities are a learning opportunity. I think that's one of the things that gets lost in this argument. Should we pay compensation for those impacted by the slave trade? Well, I'll leave that to others to decide. That's a decision for people who are far more intelligent and far more switched on than I am. But should we be looking at that and going, we don't want to be going down that path again? Yeah, we probably should. We probably should. And when you think about the way that the world has shifted now, that I know we have this term of modern slavery, and there is suggestions that there is still modern slavery taking place, not just in this country but in this industry. Migrant labour that is just being sort of handed out to a ganger or something like that, and being used and abused. I take all of that. I take all of that on board. Where I do have an objection, though, and that imposing of empires and slave trade back in the day used to be done by nations. The British did it, the French did it, the Spanish did it, the Germans did it, the Ottoman Empire did it, and so on down the line. Today, that kind of action tends to be corporate. You've got major corporations, be it Amazon or Nike or somebody, setting up shop in a foreign location, sometimes in the Far East or whatever it might be, and basically, underage labour, people that aren't, but basically their workers' rights and their human rights are completely washed over so that they can make their cheapest possible goods. It's not a problem that's gone away, I don't think. Mick says, most construction companies probably place more emphasis on installing gender-neutral toilets than countering bullying and racism in the workplace. They do. And here's a thing. So I'm not going to get into the gender-neutral thing because that's gender-neutral toilets. How many gender-neutral people are there in demolition and construction? My guess would be very, very few. However, let's talk about female toilets. There's a sentence I never expected to say on a live show. Let's talk about women's toilets. So from a tick box standpoint, we have decided that we have either got female workers on demolition and construction sites, or we could have, somebody could be delivering some materials or delivering parts who is female, and they may need the loo while they're there. So we've put in place a regulation that says there's a site, we have a male toilet, we have a female toilet, and in some instances we have a gender-neutral site, gender-neutral toilet. What we don't have is the mentality that goes with that. So yes, there's a female toilet, but that doesn't stop people, and we've heard reports of this so many times now, of that female toilet being targeted, as I say, with, dildo stuck to the door so that the poor young woman that's going to the loo, just going about her business, she gets encountered with that. So we've put in place the toilet, but we haven't put in place the safe working environment that goes with that. Mick says, don't put the sins of the father onto the son. Quite right, sir. Quite right indeed. Dan Cullen says, have a wonderful weekend, guys. Stay safe. Tell your loved ones you love them dearly, and no matter what, see you on the flip side. Yet, Dan, you arrived late. Don't forget, there is a show on Monday, no show Tuesday, Wednesday. Mick Norton says, messed around. They don't know they're born today. As a young military grader operator, a chinless Scottish lieutenant once sent me on a 45-mile round trip to remove a 300-metre windrow because it looked untidy. That'll never do. Go tidy that up, would you? Even Google and Facebook Meta are trying with the whole internet. Yeah, dead right. Right, new pies coming out at 12, so stay safe, fellas. Have a good weekend. Double and a few pints. Apart from the few pints, which are no longer allowed. Mick, that sounds like a perfect Friday. Have fun, my friend. I've never met a gender-neutral person on site. No, me, I'm not entirely sure I've ever met a gender-neutral person. Full stop. I don't ask, because ultimately they're just a person. I don't go toss what they are or what their pronouns are. Do it, person. You're nice, I'm nice. Good enough. And Dan Kahn says no show on Tuesday. No show on Tuesday at all, I'm afraid. Leaving here shortly after the sparrow farts in the morning, and I won't be back until Wednesday night. So yeah, no show on Tuesday or Wednesday. This gender thing is BS, says Dan Cullen. I know what you're saying, but I don't necessarily agree. Live and let live is my feeling on that. If you look like a bloke and you decided I fancy myself as a woman, good luck to you. Knock yourself out. I don't care. It's not like you're impacting my life at all. Whatever. On that note, I don't know whether that's politically correct or not, but on that note, I'm going to call it a day, people. I'm going to go and try and turn what we've just said into some sort of podcast, which you'll be able to catch a bit later on, probably this afternoon now. I'll be back on Monday for the first of just... let me think. 3 shows next week, and no, not 5. I'm here Monday, away Tuesday, away Wednesday, back Thursday, Friday. So if you fancy a bit more of all of this, let's recoup and regroup and, I don't know, do something else on Monday. And I can now report that our friend BM1113 Heavy Equipment Videos is in Sweden. Now, my friend, I'm going to be in your country in about a month's time. I'm going to Eskilstuna with those fine folks at Volvo. Whereabouts in Sweden are you? I'm not suggesting we meet up for a cup of coffee, although if you are carrying cinnamon cakes, please feel free to bring some along. But whereabouts are you in Sweden? Love to hear from you. If folk have the right to be whatever they are, then folk have the right not to like it. But neither has the right to be aggressive about it. Quite right too. There's a bit of me that wanted to greet that with, right, okay, you lot, fuck off. But that's just my silly sense of humour. Nice, says our Swedish friend. So, he's 1,000 kilometres north of Eskilstuna. So any meet-up and cinnamon buns, not going to happen, is it? Jim Turner says, freedom of speech says they can both air their views. Yeah, I'm all for a bit of freedom of speech. But freedom of speech doesn't give you carte blanche to be a tit. So my message at the end of the day is go about your life. Have a good weekend. I'll see you Monday. And between now and then, try not to be a dick. I will do my level best. Till then, everybody, have a great day. See you soon.